Right now, somewhere in the Arabian Sea, a US aircraft carrier strike group is on station. Somewhere in Qatar, forward-deployed air assets are on alert. Somewhere in the Pentagon, generals are mapping escalation timelines. And somewhere in Beijing, no alarms, no war rooms lit up. Just quiet, calculated patience. Here's the question no mainstream outlet is asking. While the United States burns money, deploys assets, and risks escalation in the Middle East, who is actually winning? Not Iran. Iran is absorbing strikes, losing proxy networks, and watching its economy deteriorate under maximum pressure. Not the US. The US is spending at a rate that would make any defense economist wince, and it has no clean exit strategy. The winner is 3,000 miles east. It has no soldiers in the fight. It has filed no sanctions. It has issued no ultimatums. It is simply watching and building. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is grand strategy, and China is executing it with near flawless precision. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you will never look at Middle East conflict through the same lens again. Let's start with what this conflict is actually costing the United States. Not just in dollars, though the dollars are staggering, but in something far more finite. Strategic bandwidth. Every carrier that deploys to the Gulf is a carrier not in the Pacific. Every diplomatic hour spent on ceasefire negotiations is an hour not spent building Indo-Pacific alliances. Every $1 billion allocated to CENTCOM is $1 billion, not modernizing the force for the primary threat, which every US defense planner agrees is China. The United States military is the most capable fighting force in human history. But it has one structural vulnerability. It cannot be everywhere at maximum intensity simultaneously. And Iran, whether by design or by fortune, has become the perfect mechanism for keeping American attention permanently divided. Consider the pattern. Every time the Middle East heats up, Gaza, Lebanon, Houthi missile campaigns in the Red Sea, Shia militia strikes on US bases in Iraq, the United States is forced to respond. It has to. The geopolitical architecture demands it. Allies expect it. Domestic politics require it. And so, resources flow in. Attention flows in. The global media narrative locks in Middle East, Middle East, Middle East, Middle East. Meanwhile, somewhere in the South China Sea, China has built and militarized 7 artificial islands in international waters, a direct violation of the 2016 Permanent Court of Arbitration ruling. The response from the international community muted because the cameras were elsewhere. This is the central thesis of this analysis. The US-Iran conflict is not simply a bilateral dispute over nuclear enrichment and regional hegemony. It is, functionally, regardless of original intent, the world's most expensive distraction. And China holds the best seat in the house. China is Iran's largest oil customer. It has absorbed Iranian crude in defiance of US sanctions, providing Tehran with just enough economic oxygen to keep the pressure on Washington. China is not funding the war, it is funding the distraction. There is a profound difference, and here's a trap that Washington has walked into. If the US escalates against Iran, it risks a broader regional war, which demands more resources and more attention. If it de-escalates, Iran's network strengthens, and US credibility erodes. There is no clean move. And while Washington debates its options, Beijing is not debating anything, it is executing. While the United States has been managing crises, China has been building a world. Not metaphorically, literally. The Belt and Road Initiative, China's $1 trillion plus infrastructure program spanning over 140 countries, has accelerated during every period of peak US distraction. Ports, railways, fiber optic cables, power plants, pipelines. China is not conquering territory. It is something far more durable. It is creating dependency. Let's talk about energy, because energy is the master variable of 21st century geopolitics. While the US-Iran conflict sends tremors through global oil markets, China has been quietly engineering a parallel energy architecture, one specifically designed to route around the US dollar. In March 2023, Saudi Arabia and China conducted their first oil trade settled in Chinese yuan. This was not a financial footnote. It was a tectonic signal. The petrodollar system, the arrangement by which global oil is priced and traded in US dollars, which has underwritten American financial dominance since the 1970s, is being quietly dismantled, transaction by transaction. China now imports more oil than any nation on Earth, approximately 10 to 11 million barrels per day. It has secured long-term supply agreements with Russia, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and UAE, many structured explicitly to bypass SWIFT, the US-dominated financial messaging system. Every barrel purchased in yuan is a barrel that does not recycle into dollar demand. Every yuan-settled trade is a brick removed from the foundation of US monetary hegemony. And while Washington is consumed with whether to authorize another strike package against Houthi infrastructure in Yemen, this process continues uninterrupted. Now layer in the diplomatic architecture. In 2023, China brokered a normalization agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, two nations that had severed diplomatic ties in 2016. Think about what that represents. The United States spent decades trying to position itself as the indispensable mediator in Middle Eastern diplomacy. China walked in, spent a weekend in Beijing, and produced a result Washington had failed to achieve in years. That is not just a diplomatic win. That is a demonstration of alternative power, and every nation in the global south was watching. And then there is BRICS. What began as an acronym for emerging economies has, under Chinese stewardship, transformed into a parallel geopolitical institution, one that explicitly offers an alternative to the Western-led Bretton Woods financial order. In 2024, BRICS expansion brought in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Iran, Egypt, and Ethiopia. These are not peripheral players. Saudi Arabia and the UAE together represent the financial architecture of Gulf petrodolars. Iran represents the defiant eastern anchor of the Middle East. China did not create BRICS, but China has become its gravitational center. And every new member is another data point in Beijing's argument that a post-American international order is not only possible, it is already arriving. Let's be precise about what we mean by checkmate. This is not a prediction that China will militarily defeat the United States. It won't, and it doesn't need to. What China is engineering is something more subtle, more durable, and frankly more devastating. The structural irrelevance of American power, not defeat. Obsolescence. Here is the long-game calculation. Every dollar the United States spends projecting power in the Middle East is a dollar it borrows. Largely from bond markets that are increasingly less dominated by the allies who once bought us debt enthusiastically. The U.S. national debt has surpassed $35 trillion. Interest payments alone now rival the entire defense budget. This is not sustainable, and every major adversary, including China, knows the arithmetic. China's strategy, in its simplest form, is to let the United States exhaust itself not through direct confrontation, but through the accumulated cost of maintaining an empire-scale military presence in a region that China has already begun to diplomatically and economically outflank. Now bring Taiwan into the frame. Taiwan is not just a democratically the United States has pledged to defend by ambiguity. Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company produces over 90% of the world's most advanced chips, the physical substrate of every advanced weapons system, AI model, and 5G network on the planet. Whoever controls Taiwan, or whoever can credibly threaten its security, controls the 21st century industrial base. China's military planners are not naive. They know a direct move on Taiwan triggers a U.S. response. So the calculation becomes, can you delay and degrade U.S. response capacity to the point where the window of action opens? Every carrier tied up in CENTCOM is a carrier not in INDOPACOM. Every $1 trillion spent in the Middle East is $1 trillion not modernizing the Pacific Fleet. Every year of American strategic distraction is a year China uses to close the military gap, and the soft power dimension is equally critical. U.S. credibility in the global south has been eroding for 2 decades through the failures of the Iraq War, the Afghanistan withdrawal, and the perception of double standards in how Western nations respond to different conflicts. China has not missed this opening. It has positioned itself carefully, consistently, as the stable alternative. The non-interventionist power. The nation that builds things rather than bombs them. This framing is not entirely accurate. But in geopolitics, framing is often more powerful than accuracy. And when a developing nation in Africa or Southeast Asia or Latin America is choosing between a U.S. partnership that comes with conditions and a Chinese partnership that comes with a port, the choice is increasingly not automatic. The checkmate is not a single moment. It is a process. It is the slow erosion of the financial mechanisms that make us power projection affordable. It is the construction of a parallel international order that does not need Washington's approval to function. It is the patient accumulation of strategic position in ports, in pipelines, in partnerships that will one day constitute a fait accompli. By the time the mainstream narrative catches up, the game will already be decided. The shift in global power is not coming. It is already underway. The question is not whether the unipolar American moment ends. History has already answered that. The question is whether you are watching it happen or whether you understand it as it happens. That is what this channel exists to do. If this analysis challenged your assumptions, share it. The people in your life who are still watching the mainstream version of these events need a different frame. Subscribe to the Power Shift Report, because the next report is already being written in Beijing, in Riyadh, in Brussels, and in rooms most cameras will never see. We'll see you there.